Some people seem like they've stepped out of a fairy tale. They bewitch and seduce. They dazzle. They have a kind of magnetic appeal that seems to bypass our conscious minds and get straight to our emotional core. Why? Well, those kinds of people are romantic archetypes, and stories hold an amazing psychological power over us. Archetypes, when we meet them in real life, seem glamorous, fascinating, entrancing, but also strangely familiar. In this video, we're going to work through 7 of the most potent romantic archetypes and try and figure out why they affect us so much. Hi, my name is Tom Bellamy. I'm a neuroscientist and a writer, and I blog all about love and limerence at the site livingwithlimerence.com. I'm also the author of the book Smitten, that explains how neuroscience can help us make sense of obsessive infatuation and how to recover from it. Right, time to get started on analysing archetypes. So the first thing to say is that we think in stories. Our brains are built in a way that we try to form a narrative structure about what's happening to us as we move through the world. And you can see this from a very early age. Kids love stories. They devour them greedily. They fill themselves up with stories to try and make sense of the world. An unfinished story is like a psychic itch that you can't scratch. We need that sense of resolution. And there are good reasons for that. So stories are a very efficient way of making sense of a complex world. Trying to understand everything from first principles is very cognitively taxing. A very quick way of condensing down complex ideas into memorable lessons is to tell a story. So the misadventures and the adventures that people have had, how heroes act in different situations, you know, what a good person is like and what the sort of person that you should avoid is like, how to make sense of all the threats and potential dangers within the world, how to identify friends, how to live well. Shared stories help build that sense of community affinity. It's like a store of wisdom from all of our ancestors collected together into a compelling lesson that's easy to learn and that affects us very profoundly. So one of the strongest proponents of the importance of stories in psychology was Carl Jung. And he developed this concept of the collective unconscious. Now, this is a slightly slippery concept to grasp, but essentially it's partly all of the evolved instincts that are built into us, but also partly what he called archetypes. So characters or patterns that seem to recur in the dreams and stories and subconscious of all human cultures. So almost a human universal. So his archetypes were kind of ancestral impressions that we have lurking in our subconscious. Jung also thought very much in terms of our personalities being built of opposing balancing forces. So he thought about our ego, the kind of conscious version of ourselves, our self-identity, balanced by our shadow. So those aspects of our personality that we don't want to face and we don't want to admit are part of who we are, so we keep them literally in the shadows of our subconscious. He also talked about the balance between kind of feminine and masculine aspects of our personality. So he called these the anima and the animus. And when it came to romantic love, Jung felt that we were often drawn to that opposite aspect of ourselves. So for men, they're drawn to their anima, their feminine force. Women are drawn to their animus, or their masculine force. So many of the archetypes that Jung talks about are quite gendered. So it's things like, for an anima, the maiden, or the enchantress, or the harlot, or the mother. Maybe for the animus, things like the warrior, or the judge, or the poet, or the father. But we're all of us made, of course, of these masculine and feminine traits, and we have them in balance within us. So it's not as though this is about male or female destiny. It's about understanding what you're drawn to as an individual person in the traits of the opposite sex. So, what really are these archetypes? Well, for most scientists, Jung's approach had a kind of discomforting level of mysticism associated with it. Is this literal or is it metaphor? Is the argument that through sort of an evolutionary psychology process, we can literally inherit patterns of thought and ancestral memories? Well, I think most scientists would say it's not literal, it's not empirically built into us. And why we're so affected by stories is still a bit unclear. But for the sake of this discussion, I'm just going to cheat and say it doesn't matter because it's useful. We do, all of us, have a romantic sensibility that's shaped partly by evolution, partly by mythical stories, partly by pop culture or role models in our own lives, our own personal experiences as we're growing up, going through adolescence. Our subconscious is going to be a murky mess of all of those influences. But when it comes to our own romantic desire, and particularly for limerence, so a profound romantic infatuation, there are some types, some archetypes that pop up again and again. So, who are they? Let's work our way through 7 of the commonest archetypes. Number 1 is the damsel in distress. So very familiar from fairy tales and mythological stories. So this would be a woman struggling with life. They've got an emotional vulnerability of some type, an emotional wound. They're not coping. Maybe they're unhappy in an abusive relationship. But the idea is this is somebody who needs to be rescued. And if you're drawn to this archetype, it's often that strong desire to rescue. The desire to be needed is the driving force for the would-be rescuer, even if the damsel doesn't actually need rescuing as such. But it's this urge to show, to prove through the strength of your love how much value the damsel has. And then when she sees that, when she's liberated from her trials, you can escape together into a state of bliss. So another form of the damsel in distress is Freud's rescue fantasy. So Freud came up with this concept after talking to many male clients who, in his words, repeatedly fall in love with a woman who is of bad repute sexually, and to whom another man can claim right of possession. Well, he had a way with words, but he did recognize a common syndrome where the man was drawn to rescue a fallen woman from her fate. Okay, so second archetype is a variant of the rescue fantasy, and this is the tortured soul. So now, rather than battling external forces, external circumstances, our archetype is battling inner demons. And so maybe this is somebody who's emotionally distant or defensive or unwilling to commit. But if you're drawn to this archetype, it's because you feel as though you can perceive a damaged soul, but you're sure that you can fix them through the power of your redeeming love. So the tortured soul might have some dark past that they need to be forgiven for, or that they've succumbed to too much worldliness and need to be brought back closer to that state of nature, that state of innocence, and be reintegrated into ordinary society. Okay, so a third archetype is the bad boy or bad girl. So these are people that act in an uninhibited, unconstrained way. So they're rule breakers. They push at boundaries and they don't care about social niceties. Crucially though, the bad boy or bad girl tends to not be a total villain. They're more like a kind of lovable rogue. So they rebel against authority, but they don't really rebel against morality. So this archetype offers liberation, they offer excitement, they offer rebellion. So they're a counterforce to people who are perhaps feel that they're too obedient, too cautious, and they themselves want the freedom to misbehave. Okay, a fourth archetype would be the authority figure. So this might be a boss or a therapist or a guru, someone with power an insight. And so for a limerent drawn towards an authority figure, the desire there is often to be seen by them and valued by them. So maybe the authority figure represents security. Maybe they're a kind of surrogate parental figure. Or maybe, in a slightly kind of darker variant of it perhaps, the desire there is to entrance and seduce that authority figure. Maybe demonstrate your own attractiveness to such an extent that this pillar of the community would willingly jeopardize all their authority and power. They would give all that up to be with you. Archetype number 5 is the forbidden fruit. So these are people you can't have. Maybe they're married, committed, or unavailable for one reason or another. Maybe it would be inappropriate to have a relationship with them. Maybe you are in a position of authority over them. Or maybe it's somebody that hasn't got a matching sexuality. But the point is, the fact that you can't have them makes them all the more appealing. And perhaps the kind of darkest manifestation of this is a concept known as mate poaching. So this is where people set out to deliberately try and steal a partner who's in an existing relationship. So this might be as simple as the fact that if somebody else is committed to them, then it shows that they've got some appeal. But it could be darker. It could be about the thrill of the chase, the thrill of seduction. For many people, this will be unconscious, that you'll just find yourself drawn towards people that you know you shouldn't have. For others, they can become aware of the fact that they're doing this. And in fact, the author Elizabeth Gilbert wrote an article in the New York Times a few years ago talking about a period in her life where she was quite consciously mate poaching. She was trying to manipulate and seduce people that already had a partner for the thrill of her ability to do this. So to quote her, "Seduction is the art of coercing somebody to desire you, of orchestrating somebody else's longings to suit your own hungry agenda." And she talked about how thrilling that she found it to think that there was somebody somewhere else in the city, perhaps in their marital bed, lying awake thinking about her. So that's clearly quite a destructive urge. It's certainly antisocial. So if you feel you're drawn to forbidden fruit, it may be that you're unhappy with the status quo and you feel that things have to change, and that by causing this big disruptive drama that you can force a change in your circumstances. Okay, archetype number 6 is the man of mystery. So these archetypes, these people, they embody intrigue and a sense of kind of hidden power. In the context of a story, the man of mystery is like the stranger that rides into town. They represent the outsider. And again, this can be a very powerful archetype for people that want to escape from a humdrum everyday life that they're not happy with. If they feel unfulfilled about where they are in their life, that the appeal of mystery, the appeal of an outsider who they can run off with, has an enormous, potent psychological draw. Okay, archetype number 7 is the free spirit. So this is the artists, the poets, the musicians, people who are liberated from social conventions, who don't care what other people think of them. They tend to be, light and fun, a vibrant personality. And that's usually what draws somebody to them. So people who develop limerence for free spirits feel that need. They need to sort of feed off that vitality. They need some of it in their lives. If their life feels too staid, too boring, too ordinary, and too conventional, they'll be drawn towards the free spirit in order to get that injection of excitement and exhilaration and chaos. If your life is too orderly, then you're likely to be attracted to a free spirit. Okay, so those are 7 of the most attractive archetypes that can stimulate limerence. And it is worthwhile spending some time to figure out whether any of them affect you. So As I went through the examples, did any of them resonate? Are you drawn to their power? That tells you what kind of narrative you may be telling yourself about your love life. And it's important to do this because you ultimately are the author of your own life, of your future. So you can choose to write a story that works for you. You can ask yourself, well, what is the plot of your life going to be? And what kind of people do you need in your life? What kind of bond do you want to form that will help balance you out and get you towards that goal? Okay, so those are the mythic types who move us. But of course, the way that people behave and the way that we respond to them is also going to be critical to how besotted we become. People aren't really archetypes, they are individuals. So in this video, I go through some of the reasons why some people can feel very addictive to us. So click through if you want to learn more. That's it for this video. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you next time.